What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode here on Ranger Central, and I am with my usual co-host Matt, which we need to do a Mets podcast sometime soon. I forgot about this thing taking over, so I will not do this whole layout for the rest. But either way, um, we got they kicked them out, okay, and then we got Big Apple Hockey with us. We got Mark and Phil. What's going on, guys? How we doing?
Good.
Doing great.
Be even better when USA kicks some Canadian ass on Thursday, and then we get our Rangers back on Saturday and Sunday. So we got a lot of puck this weekend. 14 games on Saturday. So if you got nowhere to go with all that snow over the weekend, get yourself a friggin' 12-pack, give your balls a tug, and watch some hockey.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward, especially to Thursday. But I do want to remind everyone on their way into the live stream to leave a like, subscribe, turn on your notifications. And if you want to listen to the audio version, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever your podcasting platform is, give a rating and review. And yeah, Kaylee, I know. I am dreading it. I'll be honest with you.
Evan, for some reason, I can't type comments in the chat. I don't know why. I was going to reply to that old AFI rules comment, and yeah, Art of Drowning. Good call, Puck Rock. Good call. I bet, but I don't know why I can't reply to comments. And
it's not letting you type it all, or
no, I can't do it for some reason.
Probably come out and come back in. Probably it's gonna work.
Yeah, I'll probably have to do that then. All right, I will be back in a second then.
All right. So while Phil's doing that, we'll start. We'll start the discussion, which I don't really have I honestly don't have a format to this thing. I'm just kind of rolling into it. Do we start with the four nations or do we start with the Rangers? Because I know what I want to talk about personally, but
go with whatever your heart says, Ev. Go right there.
Let's do four nations.
Still can't do it, but whatever at this point.
Yeah, I'm with Matt. Let's talk about the four nations a bit, which USA, it's been electric watching them. Unfortunately, lost, ruining going undefeated yesterday. But either way, the game didn't really matter, which I did want to start the conversation because of the fact that we were talking about it a little bit off air and before Phil joined. What do you guys think about the Quinn Hughes thing and how they're not going to let him play unless there's an injury? Matt, if you want to start.
Yeah, I don't agree with it. I mean, personally, like what Mark threw him before he even started, that he was one of the first 5 guys to be named on the roster. So the fact that, one, he's one of the U.S.'s best and most important players, and just because, he wasn't on the roster when it first started, you're not going to let him come back in unless there's an injury. I think that's just dumb. I think, again, why are you going to hold out one of your better guys, one of the best defensemen in the whole NHL, the guy who won the North last year, one of the best skaters, one of the best offensive defensemen in the league, and you're going to hold him out because of some dumb roster rule? I don't agree with it whatsoever. If if I was the NHL and I was making that rule, I would let Quinn Hughes play tomorrow. It just, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
My view on it is that if any of you watch the World Championships, they're allowed to add players that come from the playoffs directly to their rosters once those teams are eliminated from playoffs. Why not have the same rule here? I don't get it. It just, like you said, you want to improve the product, you want to have the best players out there, then do it. Let the players play. I mean, if Quinn Hughes says he's good to go, and he was named on the roster, okay. I understand the whole thing with Canada and adding Thomas Harley. Thomas Harley wasn't on the roster. And then, the injury to Shea Theodore, they brought in, Thomas Harley, even though I think there could have been other guys that they could have brought in there. A whole other story for another time. But let these guys play, especially if it was somebody that was actually named to the roster. He was named to the roster. He was named. He was there. And then even if not, just let them bring on guys. Let them have extras. The roster limits are so dumb. You can't have reserves and stuff like that. Why not? Why the hell not one reserve? That's it. That's all you're going to give in case of the injuries. Did we not see John Tavares mess up his knee at the 2014 Olympics? And did we not learn from that lesson? I mean, the World Cup of Hockey back in '96, And the amount of players that withdrew from that cup, Ray Bourque didn't play in it. Mario Lemieux didn't play in it. Patrick Waugh didn't play in it. I mean, come on. So I just feel like the NHL they never learn their lesson. Best sport, worst league.
I'm going to say maybe that's the NBA now, but that's a different story. That's the worst league, not the best sport. But this is a guy that was named on the first 5 on draft day. I'm in the Sphere. They have Quinn Hughes' picture up. He did the press tours for all this. He got injured playing NHL games. This is an NHL exhibition. Let him play. I mean, do we need to get Ken Watanabe to get him out there and go, let them play? So it's not like they're circumventing the rules or anything and somehow getting Leon Draisaitl to play for Team USA because we beat them in 2 world wars so far. But it's like, just let's just get it going. Just put him on. It's stupid to be doing this. And yes, I went a little bit ultra snarky.
Yeah, you even dropped a Ken Watanabe reference. Like, who the hell was going to do that in a hockey stream? So you did go ultra snarky for that. Oh, we got Anthony in the chat here. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Anthony actually interviewed Quinn and asked a question in the scrum.
It's just ridiculous how, again, I'm going to refer to the tweet that I saw earlier that I did off air. It's ridiculous how the NHL is taking it more seriously, how teams are manipulating, if you even want to call it manipulation, with the rosters versus with LTIR and cap circumvention.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was waiting for somebody to say it.
It's completely garbage how they're not letting him on the roster when that's like if the MLB, where their rule in the playoffs is you can't make roster changes unless it's in between series or if a guy's coming back from an injury. Imagine they said, no, you can't bring a guy back because of an injury. It's just complete and utterly ridiculous, especially when they already have McAvoy injured. So you would think they'd be allowed to at least have him as a reserve. And then, I don't know, maybe Sanderson stubs his toe in the hotel in the morning. Who knows? But either way, I don't understand.
Down with the flu.
Yeah. All of a sudden he's got the flu and he won't have his Jordan flu game, but I just don't understand it at all. And they definitely do need him for the power play, like Nicole is saying. The power play is missing him, which granted, Werenski wasn't terrible once they made that switch initially with Fox and Werenski, but they definitely need a lot more of the firepower, especially because you're not getting enough production from the back end, really. And on top of that, they're not getting production even from some of the star guys up front. Like, you're not getting it from Matthews right now. You're not getting it from Jack Hughes right now, who are 2 guys that should be picking up the heavy lifting right now. They need Quinn Hughes, but this is just unfortunately what it is with the rule. And yeah, like Carson saying, Fox hasn't been playing great either. The back end has just not been. It's definitely been a letdown so far.
I'm gonna interject there on Fox. I agreed through the first 2 games, but I thought he played his best game against Sweden. I thought he was much better than he was the first 2 games. And the bar may be a little low there with how bad he was in those first 2 games. I will say they took him away from Slavin, and then he started playing badly. He does not play well with Hanifin. Him and Hanifin are just not a good pair. And Hanifin, I think, has been worse than Fox.
I agree.
I think Hannifin's been the worst player on the entire U.S. roster. I'm with Julian, though. Jack Eichel,
easily.
I just said it last night to my buddy James, who Mark just met recently. I said that Jack Eichel is starting to remind me a lot of Mike Modano once Ken Hitchcock came along. He's starting to play that 200-foot game, and he understands what it means to win. He popped off Leo Carlson's helmet last night with that hit. That's not something you would see from Jack Eichel in the past. But ever since he got to Vegas and now playing on a line with Mark Stone, this guy understands the defensive aspect of the game so much better. Mark Stone being on a line with him probably hurts Canada because Mark Stone has made him a better defensive player. And that's not what you want to see if you're Canada right now.
Yeah, he's definitely been the best player. It would be a shame, if the Rangers had an opportunity to get him and passed up on that. But he's been he's been
life comment. Oh, PTSD.
My neck hurts just thinking about that now.
Oh, that's right. Jack Eichel's on Mark's Ebola list.
Oh no, yeah. I never called him locker room Ebola.
No, you never called him locker room Ebola, but you got so tired of hearing his name that you would bug out all the time.
Oh yes, now that is true. On the other hand, like every single day, like I mean, I wonder how the hell John Gibson does it. Every day he wakes up, there's another trade rumor about him.
I used to love when the two of you would come into our Big Apple hockey streams and like Jack Eichel's name would get like brought up, or Evan would even just troll the chat and just be like, can't wait for the first Jack Eichel reference to watch Mark just bug out. And Mark on cue would just absolutely go ape shit.
No, I think that was more the Jacob Chikrin of trade rumors because
both of them. Both of them.
Yeah, Jacob Chikrin was even worse because every other day it was Jacob Chikrin's going here, Jacob Chikrin's going there. He's being held out of the lineup for that. I mean,
because we got to talk about that one from later.
Yeah, if you guys remember, I think it was during the last days of All Things Rangers when the show, that's what it was called. But I had the In the Mouth of Madness scene where Jack Eichel was the author talking to Sam Neill, and just the fact that we all could go crazy just with all the Jack Eichel rumors back then.
Honestly, the guy that should be on your Ebola list more than anyone is Gibson, because he's the guy we hear about in trade rumors every year, and it's been like almost a decade at this point. So if you're going to put anyone on the Ebola list, put him.
I think he's finally going, though. I think Dostal's really established himself as the guy there, and they're done with him.
I'm sorry, but that gimmick in 2025...
Can we get where are the Shaq to Kobe like clips, or the Kobe to Shaq clips with the friggin' lob cities?
We'll get there. Trust me, we'll get there. But Werenski, he's been, honestly, I gotta put my hand up and say that I was wrong about how good Werenski is, because going into the year, I thought it was crazy how high he was ranked on some defenseman list, but I underestimated how good he is, and I think he's been the best defenseman for USA in the four nation. Either him or Slavin.
I would say Slavin by a very small margin, only because of the fact that, Werenski's been good with moving the puck, and he's actually made some real good defensive plays as well. But Slavin's defense is just like I feel like I'm watching like Nick Lidstrom light out there with the way that he plays defense. Just the cerebral aspect to it. Like, this guy's just literally blocking pucks and picking off passes and just stepping into the passing lanes to intercept at the right times. And his gap control reminds me so much of Lidstrom. Like, when I watch, when Canada was trying to enter the zone against him, his stick was literally right there on the line. And if I had to if I couldn't use Lidstrom to teach somebody how to play defense and I had to pick a current player, I would pick Slavin to show kids how to control the gap, stand the line, close the gaps on the players along the boards, tie a player up, get body position on them. Like, he's just so smooth and effective in the defensive end.
He's my favorite defenseman to watch, just out of a pure defensive aspect.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's one of the. I'm surprised that this guy. I mean, it would be such a shame if this guy did not end, unless I just forgot about it. But if this guy doesn't end his career with a Norris Trophy, that would be a robbery.
You didn't forget, Matt, and Phil has talked about this. I tweeted about it this week. The NHL needs to have the Rod Langway Award. You need to have the Defensive Defenseman Award. Reward guys like him that are on the opposite side. I mean, one guy that comes, using another example, maybe Devon Taves. There you go, Phil. I said his name right. And that it's not just about the superstar that gets all the points. You can have the Bobby Orr Award, the one that scores the highest amount. So Erik Karlsson can have it, and you never have to hear about that ever again. And Slavin, who has been amazing, and we had the pleasure of having him on Big Apple Hockey. You guys could always go check that out. He a total gentleman, and just again, this guy deserves the recognition. Can't say that enough.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look at Langway, and the guy won 2 Norris trophies in a row in the 80s without even scoring 40 points in a season. Like, that just goes to show you how good he was defensively at a time where defensemen were scoring like anywhere from like 80 to 100 points, depending on who you were. So, Jack Ruedel, oh my God, no.
And by the way, low scoring doesn't qualify you for this award, Ryan Graves.
Don't even get me started on Ryan Graves. No, but I mean, Slavin's just been unbelievable. We could talk about Brady Tkachuk, who Dino just mentioned, and how like you even saw the difference last night in play. Like Brady Tkachuk went out there, they went out like a house of fire. That line, him, what was it, Eichel, Tkachuk, and Kreider, and they went out and scored a goal 35 seconds in, and Tkachuk's throwing hits left and right. And then when he left the game, it was a different team. Like, they are heart and soul players. Tell you right now, if it requires Lafreniere, Perreault, and something else, I probably would give that up for Brady Tkachuk, because that's the guy you want on your team. That's the guy that's going to not only that, but you complement JT Miller with him. That's the type of team you could build a winner around.
Yeah, just be careful. You're soft tampering a little bit right now, but I just
thanks, Larry. Michael
well,
and Laura, I hope you don't see this.
We'll get to Larry Brooks at one point, but yeah, I would die for the Rangers to get Brady Tkachuk on this team. I would do anything for it. And the second Sullivan put those two, Brady and Matthew, in between or next to Jack Eichel, just completely change everything. That and switching Hannafin and Faber, putting those two away from each other, both of those things completely changed the entire dynamic for this team. And I do want to actually ask a question related to Brady Tkachuk, because of the fact that friend of the program, NYR Louie, tweeted this yesterday, and I want your guys' opinion on this. So he tweeted, if you take Artemi Panarin off the Rangers tomorrow and swap them out with Brady Tkachuk, the Rangers are a worse team. I replied to him simply saying, is this rage bait? What is your guys' opinion on that?
No, I think they're a better team. Brady Tkachuk won't put up as many points as Artemi Panarin, but he's going to impact the game in other ways that Artemi Panarin simply just cannot and has not impacted the game. And Artemi Panarin is probably one of the better Rangers in Rangers history. He's probably the best signing in Rangers history. But at the end of the day, it's just like the Roger Nielsen teams in the early 90s. They were skilled. They were talented. They didn't have that toughness or that element that was needed to win it all. And the season after Nielsen got fired, Keenan came in and they won it in 94. And when you bring the type of players like Brady Tkachuk and those guys that can come in and just change everything around in a game by adding skill and physicality, then no, Messier was not a signing.
Messier was a trade.
Yeah, that was a trade in 91. Nichols, Stephen Rice, and Louis DeBrusque. But yeah, Brady's another. Yeah, MYR for life is right. Brady steps up, in big games. He's had big games on international stages at the World Juniors. He's playing great right now at the Four Nations. I mean, this is a guy that once you get into the playoffs with him, I think you're going to see what he has in store.
Matt, you want to take this one first, or you want me to go jump in on that?
No, you're the guest. You can go first.
Oh, okay. No, they're not better with Brady Tkachuk. It depends on the point of the season you want to say. Would Brady Tkachuk be a better playoff player? Yeah, because Brady Tkachuk would do the things that get dirty. Are they better in the regular season through 82 games? That's where Artemi Panarin shines. Now, I think Panarin has a little bit of a bad rap. I think he's going to evolve, and he is evolving a little bit. People forget he was tied for the most game-winning goals last year in the playoffs. It was him and I believe it was Alexander Barkov at 4. But it's just you can't. It's apples and oranges for one thing, but you can't discredit everything Artemi Panarin's brought to this team. Now, if you're going to say for the way forward, on the other hand, yes, it's hands down Brady Tkachuk. but that's easy because there's a 10-year difference between the two of them.
Matt.
I mean, I get what you're trying to say. When
Brady Tkachuk gets to 120 points, you call me.
Okay, fine. When Artemi Panarin starts impacting the game defensively and physically, when you need it the most in the playoffs, then you call me.
Okay, call me when Brady Tkachuk plays in the playoffs.
He probably will this year if the Rangers don't pick their shit up.
I'm not
Even
saying
if
he's
they
not.
I think they'll make it at this point. But
for me, I gotta. It's a hard disagree. The Rangers are a much better team. When Brady Tkachuk is on the team instead of Artemi Panarin. And listen, like kind of like what Mark was saying, like I'm not going to discredit Artemi Panarin. I thought in terms of him being an overall free agent signing, overall, I mean, in terms of point wise and skill wise, he probably is the best free agent signing that the Rangers have ever had so far through their history. But Brady Tkachuk just does things, and his impact on the game is so much better, especially in a playoff environment. Brady Tkachuk is one of those guys that you want to go to war with. You really want to die with. He's gonna go into those corners. He's gonna win those loose puck battles. He's gonna throw those big hits. He's gonna make an impact defensively. And listen, like I said, I appreciate Artemi Panarin. I appreciate his skill set, what he can do in the regular season. Because I'll be honest, watching that line of Trocheck, Panarin, and Laffy last year, that was probably one of the best lines I've ever seen in my whole life of watching the Rangers. I mean, that line last year had incredible chemistry, and they carried the Rangers to a lot of wins last year because through most of that season last year, while the Rangers were a President's Trophy winning team, that line, for like I said, for most of the season, they were a one-line team, and that line came up clutch time after time and time again. But during the playoffs, like I said, Artemi Panarin, he disappears. And listen, I get it. Like I was saying with the whole, they won the President's Trophy last year. Listen, I love the fact that they won the President's Trophy last year, but you know what? I would have easily swapped Tkachuk for Panarin last year because you know what? Maybe they would be worse off last year in terms of where they finished standing wise, in terms of points and not winning a President's Trophy. But you know what? They would have had a lot. Not easier of a time, but they would have had a better chance of beating the Panthers last year if you had Brady Tkachuk on the team than Artemi Panarin. Yeah. So for me, Brady Tkachuk is the clear answer here. But and like I said, this is no disrespect towards Panarin, but Brady Tkachuk's skill set and what he brings every night on a nightly basis, those are the type of guys that you need in the top of your lineup to win a cup.
Yeah, and I get your point, Mark, with call me when he hits 120 points, but we have to remember that was a career year for Panarin. Outside of that, he'd never hit 100 points, which I get context matters because in one of those seasons where it got cut off, he probably would have, or if he played a full season, 2 seasons, he probably would have hit 100 points. The year that it was the bubble year, and then 21-22, he missed a few games, probably would have hit 100 points in both. And I know Brady Tkachuk isn't going to give you, he's probably going to be at best a point per game for you. And that's at best, but you take it any day because remember how we looked at the Justin Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar trade with Matthew Tkachuk. And I get that Matthew Tkachuk was producing at a higher clip, but everyone looked at it like, why the hell are the Panthers getting rid of one of their top point producers, a top 4 defenseman, and more for Matthew Tkachuk? And then look at how much that has changed things. And this is it, yeah. Like, Panarin is the better regular season player, and I know we don't have the data to see that Brady Tkachuk is a better playoff player, but I would say that these games right now that we're seeing are comparable enough to a playoff environment. Would you guys not agree?
Yeah.
And
getting close.
And I think in these 3, or in the games that he has played, I think he has shown more to me that he would be more fit for the playoffs versus Artemi Panarin throughout his entire Rangers tenure, outside of the overtime winner he got versus Pittsburgh.
It's the same thing that was said about Marian Gaborik and Mike Gardner, and Gaborik before he won his cup. But it was a lot of criticism about how they couldn't perform when the games got, more physical, more tightly checked. And look at Mika Zibanejad. He's another one. In the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, he can actually score. In the third round, it's not there. It's just not there. He's had like maybe 1 or 2 games in those third rounds where he looks effective, and then the rest of the games, it just looks just non-existent. I mean, you have to be able to fight through that type of play and dish it back. And Panarin is not capable of that. He's just not. And it's a shame because he's a great player. Again, like I said, he's probably one of the better free agent signings in recent memory in NHL history, and probably in NHL history. I mean, to get the amount of points that they've gotten out of him and just is unbelievable. Usually big free agent contracts, especially the New York Rangers of all teams, go out there and give these guys big contracts, and they shit the bed. This is the one exception to the rule that has gotten a massive contract from this team, and it has come in and has performed it, and has actually outperformed the expectations of that contract. Like nobody thought Artemi Panarin was scoring 120 points in a season. Who the hell thought he was going to challenge Jágr's record? No one. Show me somebody that thought that, and I'd call you a liar right to your face. But he went and did it last year. And now we're looking at the guy that had that amazing dominant year, and he's just not the same player. And he's been called out by Chris Drury before. You got to wonder what happens this offseason with him if they either don't make the playoffs or if they do and he has another poor showing. Because there's 1 year left on that contract, and I can guarantee you they're probably not going to bring him back. He's not going to come back. They're going to go forward. They're going to go in a different direction. And unless he takes half of what he is making now to stay, I don't see them bringing him back. So maybe you might have to look into trading him away.
I mean, you know what? Last year, it really last year's playoff run really soured my taste of Panarin because I get it, because people always bring up, oh, he is a playoff player. Look at the 2019 playoffs with Columbus. Well, I'm like, yeah, 2019 is 6 years ago. That's a long time ago. That's completely under new team, new system. Sure, he performed there, but ever since becoming a Ranger, he really just hasn't performed well in the playoffs. I mean, you look at 2022, right? Sure, I originally gave him the pass because, supposedly he had the whole back injury and stuff. And cool, he scored the game-winning goal in Game 7 against Pittsburgh, but really throughout that whole playoffs wasn't noticeable. Then 2023, the excuse was, the team was under Gallant. There was no system. There was no direction. The locker room was completely, just fell off with Gallant, and the whole chemistry was messed up. So, okay, cool. Wasn't good again, but fine. We'll give you another pass. But then really 2024 last year, that was really the big red flag right there in your face if you ignore 22 and 23, because the whole thing was, the team never had a system. Panarin, with his line mates, he never really connect. And last year he had that line. He had the line last year with Tkachuk and Panarin. He had the system under Laviolette. And the whole thing, when it came towards playoff time was, Panarin needs that extra room, that extra time and space to really be effective in the playoffs. But you know what? If you're a top player in the NHL and you're one of the top guys on the roster and you're being paid one of the most money, I'm sorry, but I cannot have you being overly reliant on your teammates to create that amount of space for you in a playoff situation like that. Because you see when they play Florida, you're not going to get that time and space. I don't care who your line mates are. You have to be willing to go in there and just die every shift and go and be willing to win those puck battles and those 1v1 and those 1v1 battles. And he simply cannot do that. And really, for me, when you looked at the playoffs as a whole, against Washington, there was red flags there already. But because the Rangers swept the Capitals in really convincing fashion, it was kind of okay, it was a tough little, it was a rough little stretch, but let's see, going up against Carolina, maybe he can, raise his expectation and his game style. And again, it wasn't. And really, the Washington series really covered up a lot of spots because while I don't think he was terrible in that Washington series, considering the fact that he just came off a 120-point season, there was MVP chance rolling through the Garden the last game of the season and the first game of the playoffs. The fact that he just wasn't really noticeable at all. And again, I'm not saying he played bad in that series, but the expectation that we had for him going into the playoffs, it really looked bad in that first round against Washington. And then you saw and I get that Mark brought up the point that, he had 4 game-winning goals and he was tied with Barkov for the most game-winning goals up at that point to the playoffs. But again, Carolina wasn't noticeable. And then again, Florida, just nothing. Yeah, I get it. He scored in game 6 to make it a 2-1 game late, but that goal
Chris
didn't
Paul.
matter at that point. It was a Chris Paul goal. So yeah, last year's playoff run really soured, and yeah, I agree. I think the Rangers and whoever the GM is going to be next year, if it's Drury, if it's someone else, whether if they make the playoffs and they decide to make a change of general manager, I think they really got to sit down with Panarin. And I get it, he's got one more year left in his deal at $11.6 million. He has a full no move clause, but I think the direction that this team needs to go in, they really need to sit down with Panarin and try to see if they can possibly move on from him this offseason. Because and even if they don't, I don't envision him coming back to the Rangers when his contract ends in total.
You brought up 2 things that I just wanted to comment on real quick. The first one was the Washington series. And that was one of the things I tweeted when it ended. He was a point per game in that series. I think he had I think it was 4 or 5 points in 4 games. It was,
and he had 3 of the 4 game winners.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Hey, John.
Thank you for the $10, John.
Appreciate that. But he wasn't that great in that series. He really wasn't. And you're right. It was kind of masked by the fact that everybody was happy that they slapped Washington around. He was okay in spurts against Carolina. I didn't think he was really any better or any worse. And then obviously non-existent against Florida. The other thing that I just had it on the top of my head. The other thing that you said that was, and you know what, I'm losing my train of thought now. There was one other thing that you said that I wanted to comment on with that. And yeah, go ahead. I'll get back to it at one point.
Well, you need the guy with that talent, but yeah, he's just not a playoff performer unless you would have to find somebody that's going to be able to facilitate his game and get the most out of him. And look, we've talked about this ad nauseum, all of us. The coaching is on constant carousel. Gallant, Quinn, now it's Laviolette. And I saw one of the guys mention they're not convinced Laviolette's the guy that get the job done, even though he's got 3 teams to the Stanley Cup Finals. But and he usually does his best work when he's the underdog. That's the other thing about Laviolette. But they needed to get more gritty. They needed to do what Florida did and kind of transition to be more of a playoff team. And that's why I can't believe I'm actually starting to say these words. I am getting to like the JT Miller trade. I'm not a guy for reunions.
Oh, here we go again with reunions.
I don't know, but that was just a general. But you know what? I think Miller's the type of guy that the Rangers do need.
That was the other thing. It was the playoffs. So the other thing you brought up, Matt, was about him having to create space and needing line mates to create space. Why was it that if he's that good and he's that highly paid, why was it the guy that was really the play driver on that line that was doing all the work and scoring the highlight reel goals? Why was it Lafreniere then? Why was it the guy that's getting paid a fifth of what he's making, and a guy that's in his 4th season then at that point, 21, 22, 23, 20, 4th season? Why is the guy that's 22 or 23 years old scoring the highlight reel goals against this team and dangling them with toe drags, and this guy couldn't be bothered to attack the middle or play any defense or take any type of hit? So I just, man, I tell you right now, it's not a good look on Panarin.
Yeah, and I also have said before that the other reason I think they have to find a way to see if Panarin would waive his no move clause this offseason is because he's the only guy on this roster in terms of like the big contracts, I mean, where you could get solid value outside of Fox and Lafreniere. Like Panarin's the only guy, and they're not moving Fox. Lafreniere we'll talk about later, but I don't think they're moving him either. But in terms of where they could get the most value, it is an Artemi Panarin trade, and that's where they could get guys that would help them win and play that style of hockey. To go with JT Miller, to go with Vinny Trocheck, and the identity shift that I at least am hoping that they're trying to go for. Because my question about the JT Miller trade is, what is next? It's not about just that trade. It's about what is next, because there has to be more to come with that trade, because you can't just sit here with this roster and think JT Miller could be the bandage on a bullet-sized wound. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again, how getting one guy isn't going to change the entire thing. They have to do a lot more, and I think it starts with Artemi Panarin. You would ideally, obviously, like to move Zibanejad. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Kreider maybe is at least a little bit, at least there's maybe a conversation there just because the cap hit's a little more friendly. But in my opinion, you've got to sit down and have the conversation with Panarin, because that's where you're going to get the value out of anyone.
Yeah. And that's why I was saying that, when they made the JT Miller trade, one of the big points that I made was that this is not the last move. This is the first in a series of moves to change the culture, change the identity around on this team. Because even Ray Ferraro, one of the last ESPN broadcasts they did before the break, Ray Ferraro was saying, like, what's the identity? Actually, no, it was the first Bruins game. I'm sorry that when JT Miller played in that first game against the Bruins, that Saturday game that they ended up losing. It was the question that he brought up is, what is this team's identity? And he went on to say that, JT Miller is a bit of a culture change. That's a guy that brings everybody into the fight. That's the alpha dog in the locker room. And that's what they want to do. Chris Drury has wanted to do that. I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that Chris Drury has wanted JT Miller for a while. Like, we know that. We know that he wanted him in 2022. And the trade probably would have cost a hell of a lot more back then. But, I mean, this is something that needs to happen now. And you're right, Evan. Like, it needs to happen this offseason. The discussions need to happen. And we can thank Artemi Panarin and, be thankful for the moments that he helped give us. Yes, that Game 7 overtime winner against Pittsburgh on the power play, all the other cool hat tricks and all goals and highlight reel plays that he's, given the overtime goal against Carolina last year. I mean, be thankful for it, but sometimes everything has to come to an end. And I think we've gotten to the point where not only have we identified it, but the front office identified that this core was not built to win. It was simply not. And that's why the Trouba and the Gaudreau moves were made. And that's why the memo was sent out about him and Kreider and all that other stuff. That's why it all happened. So, like you said, no more bandage over a gunshot-sized wound. Start making the necessary corrections and moving on.
That's why I also just wish they didn't wait to make some of these moves. I mean, that's a different can of worms. If we want to get Mark on a tangent, honestly, I get all of us on a rant. But this is why I wish they made these type of changes. Obviously, we don't know the availability of JT Miller in the offseason, but I wish they made, the Trouba trade. They forced that in the offseason, because if you actually started to show signs of that shift in the offseason and they get off to the start they did, they would feel, okay, we have a shorter leash here. We don't have time to fuck around. And, the second the wall they hit in November, December comes, then ideally you would think changes happen then. But instead they went into this season with a similar roster with the cloud over their head with Trouba, and they let all of this snowball to where it did. And this is, I mean, Paul's point is what I was about to get to at this too. You're just not going to win with a lot of these players that he named. You're just not. And
I wonder if that's Paulie G, my buddy Paul.
But part of the issues has to do with decisions Jeff Gorton made, and you could even argue John Davidson too in there. And Drury's now seeing what the roster is and trying to reshape it. And he's been doing this ever since the Tom Wilson incident, and that he got the job. But it's just, you look, and I just wonder how much changes he can make. Never mind in the offseason, guys, because Kreider would have to be an off-season thing. Zibanejad would have to be an off-season thing, if that's even going to be possible. And so would Panarin. But, I mean, what can he do this season? That's what's sort of concerning, because if you want to make the comparison to Florida 2 years ago, that they kind of struggled, found their way under a veteran coach, redid a lot of what they did when they were a President's Trophy team, and then now they're trying to get a different identity, and they carried that all the way to Stanley Cup Finals, but just ran out of gas by the time they got to Vegas. Then maybe the Rangers could do something. It's just I don't particularly see it right now with this roster.
yeah, no, I agree. And I just wanted to bring this comment up that, you know what Dolan would love more than jersey sales? He would love playoff revenue. And
Yeah.
if he wants to get that playoff revenue, Drury's going to have that conversation with him also and say, we're doing what's best for the team. If you want your playoff revenue, this is what we have to do, because we need this team to go deeper in the playoffs, and Panarin is not cutting it. Do I think that this is realistically going to happen? I have no idea. I think it's more likely if they make the playoffs and Panarin has another showing, or another no showing, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, who knows if it's going to happen? But the fact that what Phil brought up before, they've had conversations before about him struggling in the playoffs, is telling.
You got to remember.
But you don't have to worry about that, because the next jersey sale is around the corner. It's the New York Rangers. They're going to get another star coming in. So.
Yeah, I don't think jersey sales or merch sales have really anything to do with Dolan. I know people who've worked directly under him, and that's not really a motivating factor. Playoff revenue motivates him a lot more. Whether or not this team moves on Panarin from Panarin will obviously remain to be seen. But I'll tell you right now, Kaylee's point about the players throwing a temper tantrum for 2 months. I mean, that comment right there really kind of says it all about the core and the way that things were going with them. And I mean, if that wasn't enough of a sign to move on, I don't know what would be at that point. So to bring in a real leader and a culture changer like Miller is something that they're going to follow up with further. In terms of, I mean, what we could talk about other moves and stuff like that. I don't know if that you want to talk about that later, or we want to get into that now.
We'll get into the starred comment in a minute, but I just want to bring up my point with this comment too, and my counterpoint to what you're saying is that's where I had a problem with the JT Miller trade. It wasn't so much the trade itself or the immediate impact that Miller would make. It's how are they going to fix what is a huge leaking dam right now within the span of the deadline and the offseason, because you're not bringing JT Miller in to retool for, or not, I should rephrase this. You're not bringing him in to take a step back for like a year or two and reassess where you are and then try to get back in. You're bringing him in to win now. That's where I have my concerns, and that's where I still need to see more before I could say, all right, the Rangers, they were smart for getting JT Miller, because if they do actually prove, if Drury proves that he could retool this roster around Miller, then great. That all of a sudden changes my entire opinion of Chris Drury. But for right now, I have to see it, which, speaking of trades and everything, well, I want to address the comment earlier that you told me to start from Kaylee about what Larry Brooks tweeted with the Lafreniere thing. And he was saying, which apparently he didn't say, I guess apparently it was fake news. I don't know what he's calling it, but he blocked Lafreniere MVP on Twitter for pointing it out. But he said, just to paraphrase, that the Rangers should trade Lafreniere for Zegras. I don't have to say much here because everyone in the chat, you guys know my opinion on Trevor Zegras. I wouldn't even trade lower end prospects for him. I am so against getting Trevor Zegras. It goes completely against what we're talking about with this conversation here of needing the identity shift and needing to be harder to play against. What is Trevor Zegras bringing to the table? Could somebody please give me the answer outside of the name, trick shots, some jersey sales? What is he bringing to the table?
Instagram highlights.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
perfect trick shots.
Oh my god. Yeah,
I'm gonna go with what I said on my Twitter, which was, and I'll paraphrase from Jeopardy on Saturday Night Live. Oh hell no, no way, absolutely, there is no way I would want Trevor Zegras for Alexei Lafreniere. And this is one of those times where Larry wrote an article because he got bored. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Goes against everything they did with bringing in Miller. I love Larry's work. I do. He's even DM'd me, and I've had conversations with him. He's been nice to me, but I can't agree with that article at all. I really can't, and it's just I don't get how he could have. Jeez. I just don't get how he could be around that locker room, know what was going on with the inner workings of that trade, and say that Trevor Zegras would be something that they would pursue. I just don't see it. I don't. I mean, you have enough of a problem calling out Artemi Panarin after 2023, where he goes and shaves his head and then has a career year. How do you go and have the idea to bring in Trevor Zegras at that point, who is like a Walmart or a Wish version of Artemi Panarin? Like I don't see it. I just don't. The next trade that I would have, if there's one big name, it would be Brady Tkachuk. If he decides that he wants out, that would be the guy that I would send Lafreniere for.
Yeah, keep Trevor Zegras away at all costs. I don't want to see this guy near New York anywhere. Get him. No, absolutely not. Keep him in California. Keep him in Anaheim. If he wants, he could go play for the LA Angels. I do not care. Mike Trout's moving to the right field. They need another center fielder. Go ahead, Trevor Zegras. Go play center field for the Angels. Absolutely not. Listen, it would just go against that everything the Rangers are or at least and what Chris Drury's trying to do right now. They're trying to change the culture. They're trying to make this team a lot tougher to play against. I mean, listen, you guys know my opinion on Chris Drury already. I don't like Chris Drury. I don't think he's a smart GM. But if he were to do this, I mean, this would just take my disbelief and my disliking to a whole nother new level because like I said, again, you bring in JT Miller, and even though, like, in my opinion, I don't agree with the trade per se, I do like JT Miller as a player, but I just don't think it's the right move as of right now. But, the Igor extension kind of forced him to go this way in terms of, going, and the type of moves that they needed to make. But the whole, if they were to bring in Trevor Zegras, like I said, it would just contradict everything they were doing right now. You bring in JT Miller because you want to change the culture. You want to move on from Artemi Panarin because he's not the right type of player that you need to win a cup with. So you bring in Trevor Zegras, who has shown multiple times he's not willing to go into those corners. He's not willing to fight for 1v1 puck battles. He's all about doing these trick shots and highlight reels. Listen, I appreciate the skill of Trevor Zegras, but like I said, in terms of what his play style is and in terms of the culture moves, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's a total. It just doesn't make any sense.
Let me just say but the funny thing about him is, I think if you got him, let's say I'm going to ballpark and say 3 years from now, maybe maturity does set in and he's back to being a winning player. Because that's the worst part. You have to say the word back, because if you remember him in World Juniors, he was incredible. So maybe he could bring that into the pros. But right now, we're all in agreement. He's all about Instagram.
Yeah, and I just don't get the appeal. What? Because he has 2 60-point seasons. there's no upside here. He's 23 years old. It's not like at best he's getting back to 60 points, which is probably ideally where Lafreniere would be. So I just don't get the appeal here at all. And I would rather have Lafreniere, as much as I have my issues with him right now. I would rather him, because we've seen what he's done in the playoffs, over Trevor Zegras by a long shot. If they're both going to be 60-point guys, it's not even a question who you should have.
I just think that you're looking at, and I'll say one thing before I kind of say my last piece on it, but I think there's a little more upside with Zegras than you're giving credit for. Maybe he's a point per game player at his very best. He's extremely talented, but I look at him as Mike Modano and Steve Yzerman before Ken Hitchcock and Scotty Bowman came along. They were guys that were talented. They could score. They showed you that they were offensive forces, but the rest of their game lacked. They didn't want to go to the dirty areas to get the job done. They lacked the defensive responsibility. They lacked the heart and desire to improve and round out their games to win. I don't know if Zegras has it in him to get the other parts of his game to a point that it needs to be to win. I really don't. I question what's inside him. It's like Keandre Miller. Keandre Miller has the size, the skating, and the physical strength to be an absolute monster, but it's not here. You have to have that mentality. Like Chris Pronger had that mean, nasty streak that made you fear him. Scott Stevens had that. They had that tick in their head that was like, okay, I want to take your damn head off. So, like, if you don't have that mentality to go in there and grind it out and throw hits and be physical and play a 200-foot game, I don't think that Zegras has that, and I don't think he's ever going to have that in him. It's just you do or you don't, and I don't see it. So it would be stupid to bring in a player like that when you're trying to get away from that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to say about that too is it just makes no sense to me to bring in a guy because of upside when you just traded a guy who you could have waited to see the upside on in Capo Caco. So what is the point of doing this? For me, this trade would be
It's been dog shit.
That's personally what the trade would be for me. But do you guys have any final thoughts on the trade, that trade rumor, or just anything else?
Yeah, one more thought, and you guys have heard me express this on Big Apple Hockey several times. There's already an extension that's been signed for Lafreniere. What does that tell players? See, this is one thing when I think about the off-ice stuff that would actually damage the Rangers. You're telling me, yeah, I just played for this team. I just re-signed. I bought an apartment. I'm going to be here for the next 7 years of my life is what I'm thinking about. But because my no-move clause is kicking in on July 1st, you're going to trade me now on an extension I just signed in October. Players are going to see that. That's going to affect things. That's why, look, you made your bed. Now you gotta sleep in it.
I think that, again, these are two different orange to apples things that I've noticed here. Evan, you talked about Caco. I think that's just somebody who ran its course. I think that I get where you're coming from with like upside and everything, but I think Capo Caco kind of just ran his course, and it wasn't gonna work in New York. So apples to oranges there, and then Mark, apples to oranges when you're talking about what did you just say again? I'm sorry, I'm totally losing
about the Lafreniere having a contract extension that's going to kick in.
Okay. So
they're going to trade him now.
You trade him for Tkachuk. That's apples to oranges. It's not gonna damage the Rangers perception or anyone's thoughts about them if they see that they valued this player highly enough to trade him for a guy that they think is going to change their entire franchise around. Did that
Trevor Zegras would not be that player, though.
No, I'm talking about Tkachuk.
I'm agreeing. I'm saying Tkachuk, people could see it from the outside. Trevor Zegras, they would not.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. That's another story. If they were dumb enough to do that, then I think I'll just go put my head through a wall.
All right. Looks like it's hoop time, guys.
From Matt Barr. There's the steal. Look out.
Shot. This is the easiest I've ever to answer.
I say beer. I can't even begin to describe.
I'm actually going to go crazy. I'm going to buy everybody around on this one.
Welcome, everyone, to Bar Talk, Layup Talk, whatever you want to call this segment, as we will be discussing topics both around the league and with the New York Rangers. Are you buying around because you're confident? Are you taking a shot because you feel the opposite? Or are you in the middle that you'll have a beer? Mark came up with a couple of the topics. I had to reword a few of them, so he still gets credit for the layups if there are any in this. I just want to make that clear. I did throw in 2 topics, though, of my own here, so if there are layups there, then I guess Mark gets the last laugh at me there.
They're by design, though, so.
Okay. Yes, it would be by design,
By design.
at that point. But let's get into it. If you want, comment to play along with us. Let's start off with this one I came up with. Dylan Garand has a .914 save percentage with a 2.73 goals against average in 25 starts with the Hartford Wolfpack. And Matt, I'll start with you. Dylan Garand is currently the Rangers' second best prospect, and he's up with the roster right now.
I'll probably go around on this one. I gotta agree. I think Dylan Garand is the second best prospect, and probably I think we can all agree that Gabe Perreault is the number 1 prospect down in the system right now. Obviously, still playing with BC in his second year, but in terms of, you look at the other prospects right now, like Brennan Hoffman. While he's had a decent stretch lately down at Hartford, like the guy has been drafted 4 years ago already, and the guy still hasn't cracked the NHL lineup, so his stock is decreasing. You have guys like Adam Sikora, who probably is going to, if he makes the Rangers, is going to be a bottom 6, 4th line player. Obviously, the Rangers drafted E.J. Emery last year, who I was excited about. Right now he's playing 3rd pair minutes in North Dakota, but, hopefully he can continue his, what I think he has a high ceiling on. Obviously, Drew Fortescue, again, who had a really good World Juniors this year. But, yeah, when you look at the other prospects in the Rangers system, for me, Dylan Garand is the second best prospect right now in the Rangers system.
Phil?
So you Matt talked about Brennan Hoffman being drafted, 4-5 years ago now. Dylan Garand was drafted the year before he was. And so he's even older. He was a 2020 draft, 4th round pick, 103rd overall. I think there's an argument to be made for it, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. I'm going to go beer. I still think that teams probably look at not just because of him being drafted later, but Brennan Hoffman is also he plays obviously wing, and goaltenders are inherently valued less because development of goaltenders is a complete crapshoot. Like we've seen 4th round picks like Igor Shesterkin and Ilya Sorokin become top-notch goaltenders. Henrik Lundqvist was a 7th round pick and became the best goaltender of his generation. Goaltenders are historically valued as far less than centers, wingers, defensemen because of this and the contracts over time. And it kind of leads into the whole Shesterkin contract situation, but we're not going to get into that. But they're valued inherently less than other positions, kind of like running back in football. It's just how it is. Just history tells you it. So I got to say beer. You can make an argument for Garand, especially with the run that he's had lately, but don't sleep on Brennan Hoffman in his recent run, because ever since he's come back from that injury, He's been a house of fire in Hartford.
Mark.
I remember back on our first ever draft special that the man who's sitting in the box that's right over to me just looked at the screen on the announcement and just said, "Why?" when they announced Brendan Ottman. However,
It's Svechkov.
you know what? And I would agree with you. I wanted Svechkov too. Garand and goaltenders tend to take longer too in development. That is a factor that's in there. And I think another thing to think about, like, where does he fall? Where does Brett Berard fall? I think Ottman would be in there. I am going to say Beer. It's possible to argue him as second. However, I can't confidently say that. However, when your goaltender is a top 4 prospect on your team, the one thing you should do is sign the incumbent goaltender, whose statistics are getting worse every single season, to an 8-year, $11.5 million contract. Sorry, I got to close with that sentence.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy around. Everyone knows how I feel about Dylan Garand, and kind of leading in with it, with Mark's point. That's part of why I was against the Igor extension, is because the one thing this team does right is develop goaltenders. It's been proven through their history, whether it's backups, whether it's starters. Why are you overpaying a strength of your team? You can't develop forwards. You can't develop defensemen. Goaltending, though, let's pay the goalie, even though we're actually good at developing them. It just made no sense in that regard. But you're finally seeing Garand take a step forward in the regular season, because the thing that has been his issue is way too up and down in the regular season. Come playoff time, he's been unbelievable. Everyone talks about Igor come playoff time. Playoff Garand is really good down in Hartford. Will it translate to the NHL? We'll never know, because he'll be playing for a different team, though, if it does happen. But either way, yeah, I would say Round, because I really like the step forward he's taking. And the only thing that I'll disagree with what you said, Phil, with where you countered Matt's point about Othman being 4 years ago versus Garand, is what Mark said, with goaltending usually taking a bit more to develop. But yeah, I'm very impressed with what Garand's given this season. I would have him slightly above Othman. And then the only other guy that really could have been considered here, it would have been Emery if he was doing better in college hockey, but he's struggling right now in Dakota. So that's definitely a little worrisome. But
I was saying that was just to back up my point again of why I went around, because I feel like Dylan Garand would have had, if the Rangers didn't extend Igor to that big extension and they ended up trading him, and then Garand would have came up, I think Garand right now would have had a bigger impact on the roster right now and for next year than Brennan Othman would. Because even like let's say, like, in a hypothetical world where the Rangers didn't sign Igor to that extension and they ended up trading him, and the Garand will come up, let's say next year, for example. Like, I'm not expecting Garand, to come up and be the starter right away and play 50 to 60 games. No, you don't have to do that. But what you could do, kind of like what the Rangers first did, when Igor first came up, is you have, and the Rangers kind of screw that up a little bit too, because you had 3 goals at that point with Lundqvist, Georgiev, and Igor, and that made no sense whatsoever. But what you could have done is, because like, and again, this is my opinion, but when you traded Igor, you would have signaled right away that you're going into a retool direction. So, like, what you could have done is you bring up Garand, he plays some games, and then you sign like an older goalie, veteran goalie, to mentor him. Similarly, like maybe do a Jonathan Quick, or you'd find the next type of Jonathan Quick to bring in and mentor that guy like Garand. So for me, that's why I said that Garand I felt was the second best prospect.
Or what the Islanders have done with Varlamov and Sorokin, even though Varlamov has definitely overstayed his welcome there. That contract's aging poorly. But we'll segue to the next topic. Alexis Lafreniere, since signing his extension, has 13 goals, 11 assists, 24 points in 47 games. I'll start with you, Mark. The Rangers are better off trading Alexis Lafreniere before his no movement clause kicks in.
I still think it sends a bad message professionally everywhere. But if you're telling me it's Brady Tkachuk, then I'm buying around on that. Then you're better off getting the value on it, because I still think it's, like I said, in the other segment and right now, it's a bad message when you say We're going to extend you. We want you here. We want you to be part of our franchise. Oh, shiny new object. Let's bring in a new one. But then again, I'll quote the words of, I think it's a Vegas owner. We're in the business of winning, not in the business of friendship or something like that. I'm trying to remember what the exact quote was. But you know what? Yeah, if you can, move them. I also just, you guys have also hit the nail on the head. Culture's got a lot to do with it, and something's wrong here. And I think trusting him more next year with more playing time and maybe a different core, you might get to see the real Alexei Lafreniere, because it's still too much Chris Kreider, still too much Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad. When are they going to give these kids a shot? Because the letter's been a lie.
Phil.
So, I gotta say beer, just because we've seen this, and with Elias Pettersson. Elias Pettersson, since the day that he signed his extension, has become a 55-point player. That's literally what he has been since he has signed that extension. That's the pace he scored at, including all those regular season games last year, playoffs last year, and the games he's played so far this year. And he looks even worse in the Four Nations. He had no points in like 3 shots within the games. So it's just it's bad. And we've seen the Rangers do this with Derek Stepan. They signed him to an extension. They were about to give him $6.5 million. They had immediate buyer's remorse on it, and they dealt him to Arizona on draft day. So I don't think that this necessarily sends a bad message. But when you look at it and you have a player that gets his contract and it looks like he's totally checked out. I mean, Lafreniere from before the extension and after the extension is night and day. I can't think of a better analogy for it, but I would really be wary about not trading him before that no movement clause kicks in, because you may not be able to recover from this contract if you don't move him. But you got to do it for the right player. You just can't move him for the sake of moving him. Move him for Trevor Zegras. Move him for whatever ADHD shiny new object comes along. It can't be that. It's got to be a player that's going to make a significant change that they're going to be able to build around, or somebody that they identify as having immense potential that can be a part of a long-term solution there.
Matt.
I'll go beer, and only because the statement that what you read is because it's trading him in general. Like, I don't think trading him in general is just smart. Now, because listen, if you're trading for Brady Tkachuk, like, that's one thing. Give me one of these bad boys, and we'll dunk it on a hoop. But if you're moving for Trevor Zegras, like, absolutely not. That move makes no sense whatsoever. It like I said, it all depends on who you're trading for, because Brady Tkachuk, like I said, is that culture changer. That's the guy that you would want to move Lafreniere for. And I do think, and listen, I get it that Lafreniere's been really bad since signing that extension. There's been multiple shifts where he's taken off. There's been multiple, missed defensive coverages that he's had. And there's multiple times that he probably should have sat and watched the game from the bench for a long period of time. But I still think there is a good player inside of Alexei Lafreniere. Like, I don't think this is who he is, because I seen it in the playoffs. I watched it last year. He was play driving that second line. There is a better player in there. But I think just, again, culture matters. And when you have your so-called leaders, the so-called guys that are wearing letters in that locker room, and you see the type of piss poor efforts that they give, the type of nonchalant efforts that they give in the playoffs, like when you look at guys like Zibanejad, Trouba last year, especially when he comes out, when he gets traded and he has his bullshit comment that, it's a privilege to get fired from MSG. Bro, fuck off, respectfully. It's when you have those are the type of leaders and those are the type of actions that they are showing off, that rubs off on a young player. Now, listen, Lafreniere still has to take some accountability here because some of those players, and they should be able, if they're good enough and if they have that mental mindset, they should be able to rub that off and say like, no, that's not the type of effort I'm not giving up. That's not the type of mindset I'm taking. But it does happen to younger players, and that's why you really need that strong locker room to mentor these guys and grow them along. And I think that if Lafreniere were to get traded, and like let's say hypothetically that you put him into that Florida Panthers locker room, let's just say, and you put him with Matthew Tkachuk, I think you would see a much better Lafreniere, a guy that would go into the corners, work on his defensive game a little bit more and be a better player. Like I'm not saying Alexis Lafreniere has to be, or he's going to be a Selke type shutdown winger, but he could definitely work on his game a bit more. And I think if you just put him into that right environment, I do think that you would see Alexis Lafreniere take that next step, because let's not forget, like the guy had 58 points last year, and people say, for a number one pick, that's low. But when you really looked at the games last year, like Lafreniere probably should have had a lot more points than he had, because like I said, 58 points. But when you watch those games, he had a lot of chances earlier on this season that he wasn't bearing because his finishing wasn't great. And then you saw it towards the end of the playoffs and towards later on in terms of the season, his finishing got a lot better. And he set up Tkachuk and Panarin a lot last year, especially early on in the year, and you really saw his playmaking take the next step forward. But Lafreniere and Tkachuk weren't finishing those chances, so you didn't see those points really add up. But like I was saying, it's more for me culture, and I think that if you put Lafreniere into that style and that culture and that mindset, I do think that you would see him take that next step as a player.
I'm gonna go round on this personally because of one of the reasons that you mentioned. He's terrible defensively. I mean, that's one thing that is a reason that I would move him. The second biggest reason, this team has such a big need on their top pair left shot defense. I think if you move Lafreniere to get help there, because everyone's so hung up on Brady, Tkachuk, or the next culture changing forward, which sure, you move Lafreniere to help get that if it's available. But if not, I would explore moving Lafreniere for someone that could seriously make an impact on this blue line and help this team defensively, because this team is so redundant in terms of what they have in the forward group and he fits that mold in terms of them being redundant. And if you're going to keep Artemi Panarin because of the no move clause, then I would move Lafreniere to get help on defense, because you can't have two guys that are so redundant, in my opinion, playing on the same roster, which I'm saying I should rephrase that, because you could have guys that are redundant, but in terms of that regard, it's just a little too redundant for your top six is how I should phrase that one.
Okay.
I think if you could get some serious help defensively in a Lafreniere trade, you do it. And the other reason is because of what you mentioned, Phil. You cannot get hung up on this bad of a contract. It worries me that they're going to be stuck with another horrible deal with a no move clause at this price. I talked myself into it potentially being a layup. I won't go there, but because I don't know if it is, but it's close to a layup for me.
And what's even worse, Evan, is if you look up redundant in the dictionary, it just says see redundant. Anyway.
Jesus, Mark. The dad joke. What else is new? Dave asked, would they be better trading Lafreniere or Igor before the no movement clause kicks in? I'm going to say Igor, because to your point about Garand, like 110% Igor for me, especially because that contract is horrendous. That contract absolutely horrendous. Even if Igor is playing at his best, like that's not a contract that you want in 5-6 years, because you're going to have an $11.5 million backup who's on the decline, and then you're going to run into the same thing you ran in with Hank, a 3-goalie situation, because you can't move one of the goaltenders because of that contract. Goaltender markets are hard enough, volatile enough, unpredictable enough as is. Like you have to get. If they could, I would move Igor before that no movement clause.
Yeah, to me, this would be a layup here.
Yeah,
this would easily.
You got
be
all
a
my
layup.
graphics.
The glass is shattered all over the court.
You gave me them last time. I never deleted them.
Oh my god. But yeah, that would be. I just wanted to bring that up just because I saw that before and I wanted to highlight that.
Well, again, I'll point out to you that Shesterkin is already in decline. since he won his Vezina. His numbers have been declining every single season. Just go up 1 year. Just go up one. Take one major stat. But you know what? I'm an idiot because I say this.
Yeah, I know how that feels to hear that every day. Keandre Miller has 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points, and is due for an extension this offseason. I'll start with you, Phil. Keandre Miller will be a New York Ranger post-trade deadline.
I'm going to say Beer because I believe he will. Should he? It's another story. I've been very, very, very vocal about this on all different platforms, whether it's Twitter, whether it's our show, whether it's your show. But I cannot give this guy a massive long-term deal, especially with the uneasy feeling that he may never figure it out because it's all up here with this guy. He's got the physical tools. I understand the attraction. I understand why people scouts would drool over this guy. But it just comes down to consistency and execution and mentality. And he plays too soft too often. He runs around like a chicken with his head cut off in his own zone way too often, chasing guys out to the point when he's supposed to be down low. And it creates problems because then the center or whoever the third man down low is at that point has to cover his spot. And that puts the center and his defensive partner in a very bad position. Anybody who's ever played defense knows this. Even anybody who's even played center knows this because it's also on them. Because they're the ones that are usually going to have to cover for a guy like that roves around in the zone, chasing guys like it's man on man when you're supposed to be playing zone. So for me, I can't give him that contract. I can't. I really can't. If you want a 2-year contract, you want to prove yourself, I don't know, like 4.5 million, maybe 5 million at most. Okay, fine. I can give you that. Especially with a down year. Like, there's no way that if his camp comes to you and wants 6x6 or 6.5x7 or, I don't know, 6.1x8 or something like that, no way am I giving him any of those contracts. You want a bridge deal to take you to free agency and then you can figure it out as you go along? Fine. But anything beyond that, nope, no thanks. Too inconsistent, too soft, too much of a head case for me.
Matt.
I'll go with Beer. I could see him get moved at the deadline, but then there's a world where I can't see he doesn't get moved either. Me personally, I would move him just because I've personally had enough of the whole Keandre Miller experiment. It was a nice thought. He had potential when they first drafted him, but it simply just hasn't worked. And like Phil was saying, I am not comfortable, especially what I've seen over the past 4 or 5 years, of saying at the end of the year, here you go, Keandre, have a 6-year deal at $6 million or $6.5 million deal. I am not willing to give him that type of contract because we've seen when Keandre Miller's on his game, he is a very good defenseman. And like Phil was saying also, he has the tools. He's a tall defenseman. He skates fast. He's a good skater, has good offensive upside. When he has to play physical, he can play physical. But again, it's all mental. And we've seen the mistakes he's had out of position, not being physical enough, just missed assignments in front of the net. There's too much risk in terms of giving him an extension. And where the Rangers are in this position right now, where they're like on a seesaw right now. Like, one move could set them back a couple of years, but then also if you hit on a move, it could, accelerate you kind of a little bit more and maybe bring you back into the conversation of being a contender. And when I look at that extension, I'm like, that is way too risky. And it's way too many years and way too much money for me to say, okay, have that contract. Because again, he's had stretches where he's looked good. Beginning of last year, him and Trouba actually looked like a very solid D pair. And then they tailed off. And then they put him with Brady Schneider. And again, he looked good. And then going into this season, you're like, okay, let him play with Schneider. Let him get a full year. He's going to be good. And then what happens? Start of the season, he doesn't look good with Braden Schneider. And he had that really poor stretch. And then they bring in Will Borgen. And then I'll give credit to Will Borgen. He has played well. I don't agree with that extension. I do not like it at all. But he has played well with Will Borgen. But again, I'm not going to give him that extension just because of a small sample size of him playing well with Will Borgen, because give it a couple weeks and you'll probably see Keandre Miller again be playing like a complete ass. And then you were saying, oh, here we go again, poor play. But hey, we extended him again, and here's another bad contract on our books. It just, for me, it's way too risky to give him that type of move. For me, I would trade him because I think he's still young enough. I think there's still potential there. I think maybe if you put him into that right team, into a right system, maybe you could figure it out. But in terms of him becoming that really good second pair defenseman that you see on a cup team, I just don't think it's going to happen here. It's probably going to happen somewhere else if it even does happen.
Mark?
I'd move on from him. Kind of had enough. Look, he might be a great kid, and he's got all the physical tools. He was a forward very late in his teens, even into college. But this is another one of those Gordy Clark things. He was the smartest guy in the room. I would love to see all the guys on Spitting Chicklets and the guys that were saying Keandre Miller is going to develop into a monster. Here we are 3 years later. Where's the monster? You got to move on from him right now. And it's got to be a little bit closer to the deadline as opposed to, say, doing in the offseason, because maybe they could do something that could actually help this team right now, because we know as an RFA, that value goes down a lot. We'll look at Pavel Buchnevich for Sammy Blais and a draft pick, but it's you got to move him now. Well, especially while you might be able to move him to a playoff team that is going to go, well, we still have his rights. We can move on from him, sort of like Rasmus Sandin in Washington a couple of years ago. Move on from him, see if we can get something for him. And they could get a veteran defense for him that can help you in the playoffs this year.
I'm going to go with, wait, what was your answer on that?
Oh, round. Absolutely round.
I'm going to go with shot for him being moved at the deadline, because I just think that this is more of an off-season thing if it's going to happen. I think that they like what him and Borgen have done together, and they probably view that as a pair that is going to help them. And I think they want to experiment with that a little bit more before deciding on Keandre Miller. If you're talking off-season, then it would probably be a beer, because the only thing that I think they like Keandre Miller. That's the thing. I think they like him. The only thing that does worry me is how much his agent's going to play hardball with them after the whole Goudreau thing, since they have the same exact agent. But I just don't think this is something that happens.
All the reason to move now.
Yeah, I mean, it would be more of a reason to, but I just don't think it's going to happen, just because of the fact that I think that they like Keandre Miller, and I think they want to experiment with him and Borgen going down the stretch to see how those two play together. And if they feel that's a good enough pair for them, then I think they're going to want to extend Miller and then go with that going into next season as a pair. Do I agree with it? Hell no. I do not agree with it one bit, because we've seen the Keandre Miller thing, like all of you said, where it's peaks and valleys with him, where one half he looks so good, the other half he looks like complete wolf shit. It's no in between with him. He's so Jekyll and Hyde, to where I don't agree with it. I wouldn't extend him because he's gonna get overpaid, especially with the cap going up. But I just don't see it happening come the deadline. But that's just me.
Well, at least Wolf, he's out in the wild.
Yeah, true. We'll move on to the Four Nations, which Thursday night is the finals for U.S. versus Canada. And we'll start with you, Matt. Connor McDavid is under more pressure on Thursday night than any other player.
I'll go beer. Like, I'm not totally sure under how much pressure he is under, because he is one of those guys for Canada right now who has performed. Like, he has been electric to the first 3 games of this tournament. You know, he opened the scoring in both the USA game and the Finland game yesterday. And listen, I get it. When you're Connor McDavid, you're the captain of Canada. you're one of the best, or not one of this, but not one of the best players. You are the best player in the NHL. There is, pressure on you to perform, and listen, I get it. Like so far through his career, he hasn't won anything. And listen, that's not his fault at all, because last year in the finals, in terms of the playoffs in general, he came and he performed last year. And I mean, the guy won the Conn Smythe as the losing team and as the captain of the Edmonton Oilers. So, like I said, it's not his fault, but as a captain and being one of those leaders, you are expected to perform. And I think Connor McDavid is going to show up on Thursday night, and it's going to be a tough job for the U.S. to try to shut him down. But yeah, beer for me.
I actually want to jump in first and say right away, to me, this is a shot layup, honestly, because I think that there are two guys I can name that have more pressure. Austin Matthews and Sidney Crosby, in my opinion, have way more pressure, because Austin Matthews has the perception of a guy that does not show up in big games, and he has not looked good in this tournament thus far. If he shows up in that game on Thursday, it's going to change a lot with what people say about him. And the reason I say Crosby is exactly what Josh is saying in the chat, is that he never lost a tourney at all. So I think there's way more pressure on the two of those guys personally, but that's just me, at least, because I think after this, McDavid, I don't think anyone's going to change their perception of him. I think he's still going to be viewed as the best player in the NHL. He's still going to be viewed as a guy that could get to the Stanley Cup Finals, because he has. I think there's way more pressure on Austin Matthews personally than anyone else, but that's just me. Philk?
I don't. I'm going to say shot on this, just because it's. I think there's not really any pressure on McDavid. He's been the one forward that has really been dominant in each of the games. After the McAvoy hit, he wasn't the same player in the game against the U.S., but he's the one guy that, shift after shift, goes out. I mean, you could probably say maybe McKinnon as well, but McKinnon I don't think has been as productive as McDavid. So no, I think Matthews is really the guy that has the pressure on him. He has to go out there and he has to have a big game, and he has to make sure that U.S. wins. I completely disagree on Crosby. I mean, the guy's he's already a triple gold club guy. How is there any pressure on him?
That's fair. I get just the fact maybe pressure is not the right word with what Josh is saying. Maybe it's more just there's a lot at stake. There's something at stake here for him. I guess that's the better way of phrasing it.
I don't think there's anything at stake for him. I really don't. I mean, he's a triple gold club guy. He's won at every level that he's needed to win at. He's won a World Cup.
That's fair.
He's won a Stanley Cup. He's won a World Juniors. He's won a World Championships. He's won everything. He's won Olympics. I mean,
this is another guy, though, I would say is pressure.
Okay,
sorry to cut you off.
This
I would agree with too.
On him. He needs to show up too.
That I would say more than Crosby for sure.
He has not shown up at all. I mean, somebody in the chat earlier on said that I love how I watched Jack Hughes against the Rangers and he's the best player on the ice, but he's complete crap in this tournament. I mean, that's true. He hasn't been good. Matthews hasn't been good either. Have they been terrible? No, but they haven't been good or very good or anything like that. They've just kind of been there. So I don't think that's pressure at all. I think this guy already has a record that if he retired tomorrow, I don't think anyone in Canada would give two shits if they lost this game when they look at his record. Does nothing to his record. Absolutely nothing. Because everybody loses games. It happens. You're not going to go undefeated in international competition. And I don't think it might mean something to him, but what he's done for the rest of his career otherwise far outweighs losing this one game on Thursday if they lose. So, I just don't think there's any pressure or expectations on him. If you want to place expectations on other players on Canada or as the team as a whole, then okay. But that roster was so poorly put together by the people at Hockey Canada. What were they thinking on putting Sanheim and Parayko on there over some of the other defensemen that they could have put on? the glut of defensemen you have, and you put them on. And then Logan Thompson being left off for one of either Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, or Sam Montembeault? Are you crazy with the season he's had? Okay. Good talk, buddy. Way to put together a roster that wins. Jeez, stupid.
That's fair also with your Crosby point, just because of the fact that he already lost to USA the other day, and that was how long was that streak? That
25 games.
25 games.
25 games, yeah. So, I mean, that already went out the window. But
It's already out the window.
Mark, what will you say on this one?
First things first, I would like to thank. Sorry, no, it's not thank. I'd like to congratulate the Toronto Maple Leafs because Maple Leaf will win a critical game in Boston this Thursday night. The question is which team, but that's a different story. Will be Matthews and Marner. I really want. I'm gonna have to go beer, unfortunately. I want to say round more than anything because if they lose and McDavid's held scoreless, he's going to be hearing it. And this is his first best on best tournament. He, unless you really count 2016, but I wouldn't have done that because he was with Team Young back then. But if you look at other guys that do have pressure, Hellebuck's going to have pressure. Is he a big time goaltender? Can he answer that? Matthews, I think the fact that he's an American helps like shield that. And the fact that USA has really been they've been more like defensively inclined, I'd say, instead of trying to like run and gun. So as long as he's playing good defense and doesn't allow a goal against, that I think everybody will be happy. And then, I mean, just to say over Crosby, you're talking about a guy that scored the gold medal winning goal in Vancouver for the host country. That guy doesn't have to buy a drink for the rest of his life in Canada. He's fine. He doesn't have any pressure on him. Maybe pressure he'll put on himself, but if they lose, they're not going to be pointing at Sidney Crosby. Now, there's other guys that they'll point at. I think it's either to me McDavid or Hellebuck, and the fact that I have to say either one means it's a beer.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think one more for me, just going off my point. Maybe the external pressure is not high on McDavid in terms of like what everyone else is saying about him, but I think internal pressure, his own pressure, I think that's the most on him because Connor McDavid, while he hasn't won anything in his career yet, and again, not entirely his fault. I mean, like I said, he's the best player in the league, best player in the world. He went out last year and won the Conn Smythe, dominating the playoffs, and just came up short in Game 7 in the finals against the Panthers last year. And due to the fact that also this is his first time playing for Canada on a best-on-best tournament, and not even playing, but captaining them, there is, I think, a lot of internal pressure on him and on finally being able to win and lead his team to victory and hoist the trophy. Now, do I think he'd rather win the Stanley Cup or a gold medal over the Four Nations? Sure, but I think you have to start somewhere, and I think getting that first piece of silverware, and the top players in the league, these generational players, they want to be put under pressure because that's where you see a player at their best, under pressure. Like we know the analogy, pressure makes diamonds. And I think Connor McDavid right now, his internal pressure right now, I think that's the most on him. And I think you'll see that spark him. And I think you'll probably see McDavid play at an all-time level on Thursday night.
I would still probably argue Matthews still in that regard, even with internal pressure, just because there's so much doubt with him and just the whole perception of the Leafs with that. But we'll move on just because I saw Mark, you said you have to get going soon. But
I just said 18 minutes. That's all.
Yeah, so I just want to get through the last few bar talk topics at least. But after the Four Nations concludes, they will announce the MVP winner. And I had to rephrase this one with the way Mark said in the group chat. But Thursday's championship game will decide who the tournament MVP is. I'll start with you, Mark.
I'm going to buy around on this one. I don't think anybody's really sticking out so far. If you want to say Crosby, McKinnon, or McDavid, sure. But when it came to the first game, 3 assists for Crosby. I don't think he scored in this tournament yet. McDavid's got 2 goals if I recall correctly. And McKinnon, I think, has got a couple goals. I think if USA wins, they'll have to sit back, look on how they won, and then figure out how to name somebody from USA the MVP of the tournament. Right now, I guess, would you say Jake Gensel would be the MVP, or would it be Hellebuck, who's only allowed 2 goals?
I got one for you.
Yeah, and I think the player of the game is going to be the first star, and he's going to end up being the tournament winner, MVP.
Phil.
Round. I mean, you're gonna have to get the hoop for this one. Actually,
Yeah,
it's
I
just
agree.
There's nobody that really sticks out. Everybody's talking about Hellebuck. Some people are mentioning Tkachuk's. Dark horse for me, Slavin. And I'm going to say that just because there's a noticeable difference with everyone that's played on his pairing and how they played away from him. Fox played with him early in the first game. Fox looked great. They put him with Hannafin. Crap. They put Faber with him for a little bit. He looked great with Slavin. I mean, everyone Slavin has played with, he's made better in this tournament. He's been the best defenseman by far in this tournament. I know people want to talk about Makar and how great, he is offensively, but Slavin has just been so good defensively. So I think if the U.S. wins and there's not like let's just say Gensel doesn't have like a big game. If Gensel has a big game, I think he could win it. But if let's just say it's other players that score goals for them, and Hellebuck is good, but he's not like great, then I definitely think that Slavin can slide in and win the MVP.
Matt.
Yeah, I got to go around. I think I kind of do agree with Mark that really, like, there has been players that have been better than other guys, but really, like, I don't think anyone's taken like that big step over to be like, okay, that's number one guy. I do agree with Phil that I think Jacob Slavin has a serious shot at winning MVP, especially like let's say if that's a low scoring game on Thursday in the final and Jacob Slavin just making incredible play after play, breaking up cross crease passes and making huge blocks, late in the game. I do think that Slavin could be one of those guys. I also look at, Jake Gensel. I think he's had a big tournament. He's certainly a contender. Jack Eichel for me is certainly a contender. I think he has a good shot at winning. On Canada, obviously, McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, one of those guys could possibly take it. But yeah, I definitely do think that the winner and definitely how everyone plays, I think that's definitely going to determine who's going to win the tournament MVP, because I don't think there's a set guy right now yet that I would say.
I have to ask a question. Was it by design?
Yeah. Everything's by design.
I think that's a round on that.
Can I throw one more name out there for MVP? Because who knows? Maybe because we heard, if you watch that Finland-Canada game, was how Jordan Binnington won Game 7 there in 2019. Oh my goodness, Jordan Binnington! I gotta say, he does his best to keep games close. When he's trailing, he keeps them really close. And when he has a 4-0 lead, he finds a way to make it 4-3.
Well, I guess we know who's on the Ebola list now.
Oh my God.
We got to introduce a segment. Who makes Mark's Ebola list in each episode?
No, we need to get the Chris Jericho, you just made the list clip.
Yeah, I got to
that's literally Mark.
Yeah, how is this anything but around here? There's no clear front runner, like everyone, like all of you guys have said. There's no clear front runner right now. Whoever steps up big in this game is winning the MVP. It's just not even a question. With this last one, though, this might fall more under your guys' new segment, but I thought I'd throw it in for bar talk just to see how it goes. But the Four Nations face-off had a few rule changes, including 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime and a 3-2-1 point system. Out of the two rules that I previously mentioned, the NHL is better off adopting the 3-2-1 point system over 10-minute overtime. Matt, I'll start with you.
This is tough because I love both. and I would love to see both be introduced into the league. I would probably say, and it's not by a lot, but probably the 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime if I had to choose. Just because, listen, I think the shootout when it was first introduced, it was cool, it was new, but it's really worn off, and you don't want to see games end like that. And I just think 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime, there's so much action. We saw it being introduced at the World Juniors this year and how chaotic that was. I mean, we saw the Teddy Stiga goal and how the U.S. clinched the gold medal over Finland. And we've seen just so many entertaining games this year in the Four Nations when they've gone to overtime. And I think for me, like I said, the games would end a lot more quicker. I think the players would have so much fun out there, and you would see a lot less shootouts. So for me, I'd probably go with the 10-minute 3-on-3, just by a little bit, though.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say shot as well. And my reasoning for it is more the fact that I am also so in favor of wins and losses over 3-2-1 point system. To me, I would just rather go to that. I think it makes the most sense out of anything. But again, that's just me personally. And like you said, with the 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime, it's just so much more exciting. And yeah, who would have thought that, 10 minutes is actually enough, because we saw it in that game. Could you imagine if they did 5-minute overtime for that Team Canada game and that went to a shootout instead of getting the Mitch Marner goal? No one would be talking about the game as much as they are right now. So for me, I got to go shot. Philk?
I want both of these rules, and I've been on record saying that for a while now. But I gotta go shot as well. Like when I watched that Canada-Sweden game and the reactions all over Twitter about the game, even coming from like casuals, athletes from other sports were chiming in on this, and they were like, this is awesome. Like, this is the type of hockey, that you want. Like, you want that thrilling overtime win where one mistake can cause that goal, and it's either complete disappointment or complete euphoria for you. Like, I know, like, when Derek Stepan scored that goal in 2015 in Game 7 against Washington in overtime, just how crazy I went in my own home. And I know it's probably the same for you guys, but I would rather see more of a chance to end the game on that type of note as opposed to it being a shootout, because the shootout, like Matt said, has really lost its luster over the years. It was exciting when, it came in 2005, 2006, and then you had the Marek Malik marathon and how he scored that through the legs goal, and everybody was just like, what? And you were getting these crazy trick shots in the shootouts and stuff like that. And Peter Sikora and the backhand move, and Zach Parise started using it. But I tell you right now, there is nothing like overtime hockey, especially in the playoffs. And if you can get 3-on-3 overtime for 10 minutes in a regular season game and avoid shootouts, I'm for that.
Mark?
I don't hate the shootouts. Everybody wants to complain about shootouts. I'm not someone that hates shootouts. And I still would actually be closer to Philk. I would adopt both these rules, but the 3-2-1 system, it would be much better. First off, it's a game is worth 3 points now in this case. And instead of it's worth 2, then you play an extra 5 minutes to add another point to both teams. Now you have teams like if we looked over at the 3-2-1 system, you get teams like the Flyers that are still in it right now. All they got to do is win in regulation. Think about everything John Hines was doing with the Minnesota Wild last year, pulling goaltenders in overtime, saying, look, we need this extra point, and that's where we have to go for it. And there's a sort of a laissez-faire attitude with overtime when it's earlier in the season. But in this case, you have teams that they'd be pressing to get wins in regulation so that way they can leapfrog teams and not have to hope that a Columbus defenseman will have a bad turnover off Vinny Trocheck's stick and actually get 2 points for the Rangers like they did in one of the last games against the Columbus Blue Jackets, where they got lucky on that one. That was almost another 3-point game that would have hurt the Rangers. It's just this would keep it more interesting throughout the season. And You know what? It degrades what an overtime win would be either in 3-on-3, which is BS hockey, it's pond hockey, or in shootout, which everybody, as Phil said before, everybody hates now. 3-on-3 in regulation. Win in regulation, get 3 points. That's what I meant to say with that.
The thing, even though I want wins and losses more, the thing that I will say about doing a 3-2-1 point system is the thing that you just mentioned, where if it's down to the wire for the playoff race, it would be so exciting to watch a lot of these games that could be decided by, a regulation win versus an overtime win. And like a team has to get aggressive and pull the goalie, even if it's a tie game potentially, just to get the extra point there to win in regulation. Otherwise, they might miss the playoffs. So that's something that would be exciting, though, about that.
The Detroit, Washington, Philadelphia madness last year.
There you go. Philadelphia doesn't need to pull their goaltender.
That to me is the biggest thing. And, you talk about Dave's comment about look at how many games the Islanders blew last year just to get that loser point and sneak into the playoffs. I mean, they're doing the same thing this year. They're still blowing games and they're getting loser points. And they get into the playoffs and then they get smacked around in the first round. I mean, honestly, I'm with time to wake up. I hate the loser point.
Same.
I don't like it. I think it just rewards teams for forget. Like, I understand. Oh, hey, you know what? You get rewarded for getting to that extra, session. But it just, you know what? If you're going to do that, then value the other points more highly, so that way there's more of an incentive to win games in regulation and in overtime. I would love to get rid of the shootout. To get rid of the loser point in general, and just and go 3-2, 3-2-0. But the NHLPA is never going to agree to that.
No.
I would rather just win losses, though, at that point, personally.
I think for me, and I've been saying this for years now, the way I would do it, it won't ever happen though. Like, I would implement 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime, and I would introduce the new point system. So 3 points for a regulation win, and then 2 points for an OT win, 1 point for an OT loss. But I would get rid of the shootout entirely. And for me, it's like this would never happen. For me personally, I would bring back ties. If no one wins after the 3-on-3, I would. For me personally, that's what I would do. But I know it would never happen.
No,
Americans
and the reason
do not like ties.
No, and the reason that I also think 3-2-0 would never happen is because they would turn around and say, all right, well, if we're not going to award teams for losing in extra time, why are we punishing teams for winning in extra time? If that makes sense, because then the team that wins in overtime is only getting 2 points versus the 3. That's why I think the answer is simple, to just go to wins, losses, but they got to be different and have the point system. But I think it would just be so much more exciting if they did do the 3-2-1 point system, just because of what we mentioned before, where you could have games late in the season where teams get aggressive, pull their goalie in tie games and try to get the regulation win, or just in general, teams pressing when they maybe would hold on to the puck and just get to overtime at that point. It would just be more exciting.
I agree.
Like that was actually the situation in a way when the Rangers played Columbus. I cited that game before. It was getting tight, and the Rangers couldn't afford to give a point to Columbus and then win that game maybe in overtime, maybe get 1 point. And they got lucky with that turnover. Will Cooley buries it. They get 2 points. Columbus gets none, and they're right back in the thick of the playoff race now. Think of what that would be like if you had a 3-2-1 system where now you get teams that are way back that are able to maybe catch up with a 7-game winning streak like what the Islanders had.
The only problem I have with that is we already are looking at this trade deadline coming up with not a lot of teams that are going to be selling. And if that ends up happening, you're going to see less sellers come the trade deadline. Like, that's the only thing that I do. That's the other thing I have against a 3-2-1 system, because teams are going to think, all right, well, if we just stack up these regulation wins, then, it doesn't matter if we're so far in the standings. We have a legit shot of passing like Pittsburgh right now, maybe, for example, if we're just taking today's point system, they probably aren't selling. They're probably looking at it like, all right, just get regulation wins and we could be right back in the playoff mix easily here. That's the only issue that I would have with that.
By the way, Time to Wake Up has asked this question several times, so I have to pose it for us. Does Kreider play over Brock Nelson in the championship game? Yes or no? I'm really hoping he does. Guy has always been a big clutch game performer. Play him. I am the president of the Chris Kreider fan club. Brock Nelson plays over him.
Yeah. I agree with that. I know he scored the opening goal and the only goal in the last game, but I just don't think they should play him. I'm sorry.
I don't think Brock Nelson's been that good.
I agree with that, but I don't know if I put Kreider in over him.
See, the thing is, I get, having a center that can play wing like Nelson, and you want center depth. The U.S. has 7 centers on their roster. But I don't think Nelson's really been that good. I just think I think he's one of those guys where it's like, which one of these is not like the others? And I'm not trying to like sit there and bash Brock Nelson, but I think there's a clear difference between like the rest of the team, or the rest of the forwards at least, and him. I mean, maybe Kreider is the other guy that you could say is close to that, but Kreider, like at his very best, is here in playoff time and in big game situations. Like he's been a guy that has been a big time performer in the playoffs in the past. Like that 2014 run, he was unbelievable. He came up as a rookie and had 5 goals as a rookie in it was like maybe 10, 12 playoff games. And 3 of those goals were in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Devils. Like Kreider is just, I think he's a much better performer in that situation. I also don't think Nelson is a great enough skater to be like, he seems like he's behind the play a little bit in this. And he's better defensively. Yes, I get that. He's probably, the shooting is close. They both have very good shots. And Nelson plays a more important position. But if you ask me, I think I'd rather have Kreider in there as opposed to Nelson, because Nelson has simply just not been effective at all in this tournament. If I didn't see his number or they didn't call out his name, I wouldn't notice him. He's just like, people talk about, Capo Kakko had that assist. Okay, if you've watched any of any other games, he has 1 or 2 shifts where he's noticeable, and the rest of the game he's quiet. It's the same thing with Nelson, except he doesn't have any points, and he hasn't really been good in his role.
That's fair. I do want to pull up a comment that I started earlier from Anthony, who suggested a trade here. Lafreniere, Miller, a first for Power, Quinn, Cousins, who says no. Honestly, I would think maybe the Rangers say no to this, honestly. And I get the upside appeal there with guys like Power and Quinn and even Cousins a bit. But to me, it's just a little too lateral of a move. For me, it's a little too lateral. I think if you're trading Lafreniere and Miller, it needs to be a move where you're definitely going to get better in the trade versus something where it's like, all right, it could be, but we don't know if it will be.
Jack Quinn has really kind of been a disappointment. Like,
that hurts my heart. I was so high on him when he was drafted.
He was touted as one of the best goal scorers in that draft in 2020. The numbers just haven't been there. Dylan Cousins is a major risk, just like Lafreniere with what's going on with his contract and his new extension. People are taking a look at Dylan Cousins, who had a slightly better season than what he did last year. Well, I'm not saying Dylan Cousins last year, the year before, when he had that big season and then he got that extension, and then it just ever since it's just been meh. I think this is too much of a lateral move, because both teams are going to be taking on one big contract that they may not really be sure about. And not only that, but the Rangers downgrade on the wing big time from Lafreniere to Jack Quinn. They upgrade big time defensively with Owen Power, but they also lose a first-round pick when they really shouldn't be trading first-round picks or any more first-round picks away right now. I say the Rangers have probably got to say no to this because Cousins, to me, his drop-off from that big year to what he is now is absolutely frightening. Lafreniere, before the contract was signed to start this season, was playing great hockey. The one thing that you could say for Lafreniere is that everyone else on the team has also gone through that same slump since about that time. Like, everyone's been bad. This whole team has been bad. And part of it is because they decided to quit for, a month and a half and not play hockey. So I got to say the Rangers say no to this. I really do. I would love to upgrade from Keandre Miller to Owen Power. And even if Owen Power never gets past what he is right now, he's already a more solid all-around product than Miller. And at least you don't have to worry about consistency issues, although there is a massive contract there for Power.
The thing that would make this more intriguing for me is if you swapped Power with Byram and you swapped Cousins with Tuck. That would get me interested, but I don't think Buffalo. I don't know if Buffalo would do that.
Won't do that.
That's the problem. I don't think Buffalo would do that without getting more value. I don't think they'd give up Quinn at the very least in that deal, and I think the Rangers would have to give up probably Othman and like another pick, but they don't own second-round pick, so
I think they would move Byram. I don't think they would. I don't think they're willing to touch Power. Power's going to have career highs again, so I don't think they would be even willing to think about moving Power right now unless their socks get knocked off. I do think that if the right deal came along for Tuck, if he was willing to move, which I don't think he is, I think he wants to stay there because he's from that area. He's actually from Buffalo specifically. But I think that they would take the right deal for Tuck, and I think they would move Byram. There's been too much talk around Byram for them to not move him. Like, he was rumored to be moved to Vancouver 2 different times now. They've had him linked to other teams. I could definitely see them moving Byram.
The floating head down here, because we're kind of having fun with this a little bit. Since it's like you can't really see my face over here. I'm leaning over here on there, but I still have to get the shoulders in. So this graphic is kind of tough for me. No, the Rangers definitely have to say no to this because right now, where the Rangers going to be in a couple of years, and when's their next first-round draft pick? Like, seriously, it's just like
I didn't see anything about Tuck the Kings.
I saw that the other day.
Like, I had reservations about them dealing this with first-round pick.
Let me find who said it, but I remember seeing something about that. I think it was yesterday.
I didn't see any of that. Tuck is the guy I would love to get. He's another one who fits in with what they want to do. Big, fast, can play physical. You know, he played well in the playoffs in 2018.
He's more of like a complimentary piece than somebody you could really like.
Yeah, no, of course. But I'm just saying for the type of players that the Rangers want to get, he fits what they want to do.
I think you have a good point, Phil, because after all, get a Buffalo Sabre, you're going to win a Stanley Cup.
It was Russell Morgan of the Kings beat who said that the Kings have checked in on Alex Tuck. So checking in doesn't really mean much, honestly, but yeah. They're targeting Tuck. I mean, we heard that with the Rangers last year, that the Rangers were targeting Tuck, and it didn't happen. So
yeah, that was some serious targeting towards the deadline too. The reports were that they were trying to really open up conversations about Tuck, and it eventually fell through. So,
all right, hey guys, I'm going to sign off here.
Yeah, I think I'm out too. I got food coming, so
yeah, we'll wrap it up here. So thank you everyone that did tune in. Please be sure to leave a like if you haven't subscribed. Subscribe to Big Apple Hockey as well. They'll be live tomorrow for their show. Is there anything else you guys want to plug at all before I end it?
Tomorrow we're actually going to be doing more of these. We're supposed to have another Who Says No segment coming up. So we're going to do a little trade deadline edition. See what's out there. Can't wait for the show next week for the trade deadline.
Yeah, and we'll probably do more pick'ems as well. I'll have some that I'll offer up. Might be a little bit of a mixed bag of things just because Four Nations is already underway. But yeah, we'll be doing that as well.
Yeah. So go check them out for those as well as some more layups over there tomorrow. But thank you everyone that did tune in. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you very much for having us.